Welcome into Rover Sports. It's Saturday today, and what a freaking night of trades. Paul George going to Oklahoma City, unbelievable. Um, it really, we haven't heard Sam Presti's name for a while, and the fact that Paul George is going to Oklahoma City, we thought he would be staying in the Eastern Conference, going to Boston or even the Cleveland Cavaliers. And for Paul George to be making this kind of move, actually, it's Kevin Pritchard. And Jeff Goodman from ESPN reports that Boston offered up to 3 first-round picks to the Pacers. And there were also reports on leading up to draft night and on draft night that Danny Ainge and the Boston Celtics were giving the Pacers 2 first-round picks. The way I look at this trade for Indiana is Victor Oladipo, who I initially thought Victor Oladipo would turn into a very good player in the NBA. In fact, he's just not a great shooter. And he had Russell Westbrook to play with last year, and he was really underwhelming in that role last year for the Oklahoma City Thunder last year. But the way I really look at this Thunder team, or excuse me, Victor Oladipo, marginal, decent defender. But I just expected a lot more in terms of shooting, in terms of creating. And you saw him play point guard in Orlando, and clearly he wasn't the answer there. He's an okay player. He's an okay starting player. He's a piece. He's not great whatsoever. Nowhere close to Paul George. Then you look at Sabonis, kid who could shoot, stretch the floor. The problem was with Sabonis is, can he bang down low, and can he utilize his size like he was able to do, in the WAC for Gonzaga. And his dad was a lot wider of a player and a lot bigger guy. So Sabonis going to Indiana now to be a center. Problem is you don't get any picks. And this is where, from the outside, I kind of question these GMs, and I would love to really know the inside scoop about this as a GM, and I kind of understand, where GMs come from, because I'm just curious if GMs value highly their relationship with players once they're dealt. Like Kevin Pritchard of Indiana, sending Paul George to play with Russell Westbrook is a better destination than, say, sending Paul George to Sacramento or sending him to the Magic. Now, maybe those teams that are in the bottom of the league wouldn't give away their draft picks and young players. But the Clippers send Chris Paul to the Rockets, where you would think that the Orlando Magic could use Chris Paul, and Chris Paul could be a good haul for Orlando. And the Clippers, the Rockets' first-round pick isn't going to be of any substantial value, but I guess the only teams that are in the running are teams that, are looking to try to compete for a title, going out and getting these superstar players for like a 1-year contract. And it's not the crappy teams where if you traded Chris Paul to like a Magic, to like a Charlotte Hornets, you would then get a first-round pick back that would be of substantial value. And there's also pieces, young pieces usually, that are on those teams that, finish in the bottom of the league. Even if you traded Paul to like the Suns have guys like Chris and Bender. And their pick with Chris Paul would be, they're not going to be a playoff team. So if you traded Chris Paul, if you were the Clippers, to a non-playoff team, your first-round pick would obviously be better. Now you look at, what the Pacers did here. I still think Boston has the Brooklyn pick still remaining, I believe. 1 or 2 more years of Brooklyn pick. I believe it's 1 more year. They might not have given you that, but they would have given you their first-round pick, which Again, it's going to, be in the 28 range. It's going to be a really crappy pick because Boston is a very good team. Then they have the Sacramento Kings swap that they could give you, or they could give you the Lakers pick. So you would ultimately get 2 first-rounders, and one of those 2 first-rounders would be good. Then you look at Oladipo, and you look at Sabonis, at whatever the first guy's whatever Sabonis' first name is, Dominic Sabonis, whatever the guy's name is, okay? I probably pronounced it better earlier in the video. The Celtics have Jay Crowder, Avery Bradley, Marcus Smart. You can get like a package of those guys. I would have went after Tatum hard. Like if you could get a first-round pick in Tatum for Paul George straight up, that would have been a great deal. Like even the Kings pick, the Kings/Lakers pick, and Jason Tatum, who I think is going to be a 23 to 26 point scorer at the height of his prime. I think Tatum's a great piece to build around. I would have, looked at that kind of a trade. If I were the Pacers, I would have called up Dallas, looked at Dennis Smith. Just look at guys in this draft that you could possibly, try to get in return. I would have even called up, the Hornets, see if Malik Monk was available in a package deal. I just think that they got, no picks for Paul George, and getting Sabonis, who, again, is a project that I don't frankly think is going to be tremendous just because I don't think he can gain enough size. I like his game a little bit. And then Victor Oladipo. I mean, he is a Hoosier. You are going to sell jerseys there because he played at Bloomington, under Tom Crean. So you have that angle. But overall, I'm surprised that the guy didn't take the Boston picks. And Boston, and Danny Ainge, they now miss on Paul George. And you look at the East, and it's so vulnerable right now. I mean, you do have LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love on one team, and that Cavs team is pretty damn good. But other than that, I mean, Chicago gave up Jimmy Butler, so they're not going to be a challenger. Kyle Lowry's going to leave Toronto. DeMar DeRozan is an incredible player for Toronto. Ibaka's probably on the move. So the East is completely gettable. The Hawks, trading Dwight Howard, they are completely in free fall. The Wizards you were able to beat last year, and you're probably going to get Gordon Hayward in Boston. If you would get Paul George and Gordon Hayward, you would have a chance at you would definitely be suited to take on the Cavs for this year. Then if Paul George walks, all that money's off the books. Now, maybe that's what Danny was thinking. It isn't worth it to really go for it this year. But the bottom line is, if you had Paul George and Gordon Hayward, you look at Cleveland, LeBron's older. Kevin Love is getting older as well. Kyrie is entering the prime of his career. But if you're Boston, I mean, eventually you got to try to get an Eastern Conference championship. You got to try to square up against Golden State. And, you would hope that if Paul George challenged Cleveland this year, he would have a big dilemma on his hands if he were in Boston. Because why would you want to go if you were Paul George? Then you'd have the same conflict, the same conflict as Kevin Durant. If you were Paul George and he went to Boston, he would be in the conference finals, barring injury. He would be playing with Brad Stevens, who's an unbelievable coach. You'd be playing in front of a passionate, one of the original fan bases of basketball with the Boston Celtics, the history of the Garden and everything, of the TD Garden, and the history of that basketball culture. And you would be in the conference finals. You'd possibly make an NBA finals. And if Paul George and the Celtics would have made an NBA finals, I would have bet a lot that Paul George would have just stayed in Boston, would have been suitable and comfortable for his family and for everybody around him. Now, he is a California kid, and he does have ties to Fresno, and he does have ties to Los Angeles. So now let's analyze this from a Thunder perspective. Westbrook and Paul George are going to be free agents next year, perhaps, probably. You look now at Oladipo's contract off the books. Sabonis is okay. You essentially turned Serge Ibaka with the Orlando trade into now Paul George. And that's pretty dang impressive if you're Sam Presti, because remember, Ibaka was shipped to Orlando last year. So now you got George and Russell Westbrook. And I think this is going to be fascinating, because the one great thing about Paul George and why I think that George can fit in with almost any team and anybody is because Paul George plays off the basketball, which is so nice. You know, he's not going to be like a Chris Paul and James Harden. He's not like a Jimmy Butler, where Jimmy Butler is not an incredible shooter like Paul George. Jimmy needs to kind of play iso ball. He needs to kind of create on his own terms. He needs the ball in his hands often. Andrew Wiggins is the same type of guy. That's why I'm concerned about the Timberwolves and Rockets chemistry issues. This is going to be great, because I'm really curious to see how the MVP of the league, Russell Westbrook, I'm able to see how he'll run with Paul George. You know, Kevin Durant was a guy that can create his own shot all the time. Paul George can mostly do the same thing. How will Paul George and Westbrook play together? It's nice to see Russell Westbrook get a running mate. I think that's important for Russell Westbrook, and I think that that's great for Russell's development, his interest in this upcoming year. I still don't think Russell, is going to sign with Oklahoma City. Put it this way, it is going to be very interesting how Paul George and Russell Westbrook coexist, because if both of these guys play great together, Russell Westbrook experienced the highs of the Harden years for a slight time. He experienced the highs of playing with Kevin Durant. So if Russell Westbrook and Paul George can coexist and play great basketball together and maybe make the conference finals next year, maybe beat a Houston or a San Antonio, maybe get a top 4 seed, these guys maybe playing together well, have Abrinas and Doug play a little bit better, have Steven Adams come along, have Roberson and have, Taj Gibson play. Go out and look for Zebo. Go look for another, free agent signing and try to get another guy in there and see if you can develop. This is now exciting, because I'm curious to see how Russell Westbrook will play with Paul George. Because when I watched Kevin Durant, it was sometimes difficult with Russell Westbrook because Russell Westbrook would oftentimes play hero ball. And Russell Westbrook is one of the most talented guys I've seen in the NBA. He's frankly maybe a top 12 in terms of talented guys to ever play. He's like an Oscar Robertson out there. So will Russell Westbrook, continue to share the ball with Paul George, who seems like a pretty easy, mellow guy to get along with. He's not like a Jimmy Butler, that created some drama in Chicago. He's not going to be a guy that's a little bit of a controversial figure. I mean, Paul George is the perfect running mate for a point guard. And that's why I'm so excited. So if this thing works out, this is what's going to be really exciting now is 2018. The Thunder aren't doing anything in the West, even if, it would depend, and you don't want to see anything happen, in terms of players getting hurt. But barring injury, Golden State is clearly a better team than the Thunder. So I clearly don't think that the Thunder are going to ever make the title, and I doubt that the Thunder would get 2 games off of Oklahoma, would get 2 games off of Golden State. They might get 1 game at best. So then you have Westbrook and Paul George, and Russell Westbrook's an LA guy too. Blake Griffin signed with the Clippers in the offseason. I was envisioning a spot where both Paul George and Westbrook would go somewhere other than Oklahoma City, because I doubt that Paul George, being from LA, is going to want to stay in Oklahoma City, which is a similar city to Indianapolis in terms of, not being as flashy as like a coastal city like a Miami or an LA. I doubt Paul George is going to want to settle down in Oklahoma City. But if he loves Russell Westbrook and loves playing with the guy, it's going to make things interesting. So let's look at LA's, okay? This is what's kind of interesting, is to look even down the line further on. So Paul George and Russell Westbrook, if they decide to go to the Clippers, they can't, because the Clippers are giving $180 million in cap money now to Blake Griffin. They're looking at Zach Randolph. They're going to sign a couple of other free agents. I have no idea what the Clippers are doing because they are not competing with Golden State either. They need to. They should have shipped everybody out of town. Honestly, I don't think that they can afford Blake. I don't think that they can afford Blake Griffin. Paul George. They can't afford three guys. And DeAndre, who knows where Jordan's going to end up at. The Clippers are not going to be able to hold Chris Paul or Westbrook and Paul George and Blake. They're not. So the Clippers are probably out. Look at LA. LA's got the money for these two guys, which is exciting. But the bottom line is I can never see a scenario in which Russell Westbrook, one of the most effective point guards now in the NBA, is going to be able to play alongside Lonzo Ball. Will Westbrook take the ball up the floor? They have different pacing to their games. Will Lonzo play off the ball, just be a shooter? Because Lonzo Ball, him and especially LeVar Ball is a dominant Lonzo Ball isn't a dominant personality, but playing basketball, Lonzo Ball has always ran the show his entire life. The Lakers, if Lonzo Ball has an unbelievable year, if you were to take emotions completely out of it and the implications of Lonzo and LeVar Ball, if you were going to take the drama and all the media circus away from just Lonzo and LeVar, the best thing LA could do is have a very successful year with Lonzo and then use Randall and Lonzo Ball then. You could use them as assets then to continue. You could acquire picks for those guys. You can acquire all-star talent. The Lakers are in tremendous. They're setting up in a tremendous spot now that Mozgov is gone because now you have Paul George and Russell Westbrook out there. You might end up landing a Russell Westbrook. You could possibly get both those guys in there. My main concern is Lonzo Ball playing with Russell Westbrook. And if you're the Lakers, you would most likely. It's interesting because Lonzo Ball can be just an amazing passer. Paul George might prefer to play with Lonzo, just like Kevin Durant preferred to play with Steph over Russell Westbrook. Lonzo's going to have to be unbelievable for you to even pose that argument. Lonzo or Russell Westbrook, who would you rather have on your team? Because Westbrook is kind of like a Jordan. Westbrook taking the last shot, going to do everything. You need just sidekicks around a guy like that. Now, you need good sidekicks. Oklahoma City. Now, Paul George. Paul George is like the second guy to Russell Westbrook. That's a dang good Robin to have. If Paul George were to stay in Oklahoma City, Sam Presti's dream scenario, you would then need another guy like a center. But I think the Lakers are probably going to get one. The Lakers are going to get guys next year. Just, Magic Johnson, the money that they have, they're going to get guys. It's just the Lonzo Ball thing is very, very. That's what's going to make this whole thing very interesting. And you look at Russell Westbrook. Why the heck would he stay in Oklahoma City? Now Russell Westbrook has a running mate again. He's going to go where the running mates go. He is going to stick this out, and he's going to be smart. He's not going to be a martyr again and just stay in Oklahoma City with no stars around him. If I had to project, the Clippers are out of it, I'm guessing. Paul George is going to be a Laker next year. You then have LeBron James who's going to be posing to be a Laker. You then have Russell Westbrook. I think Russell Westbrook, unfortunately, is going to get left out of it. I think he might be a Clipper with Blake Griffin. And Paul George will end up going to the Lakers, and LeBron might end up going to the Lakers as well. And Westbrook and George are probably not going to play together again. But next summer is going to be the craziest summer in NBA history. That's what we know right now. And I'm hoping that Paul George and Westbrook have a great chemistry. I'd love to see these guys reunite and play together for a long, long time and see Russell Westbrook find that guy again. Because Russell Westbrook, I'm sure that he didn't like seeing Kevin Durant win a championship. And this is an exciting move for the NBA. It's exciting. It makes the West intriguing to see these new pairs kind of unite. And now the Eastern Conference is a complete dumpster fire. I had a couple of Bulls friends of mine texting me and talking to me, and they all said something pretty funny. They said, "We're trying to tank, but we can't because the Eastern Conference is so awful." And that's true. Eastern Conference is awful. It's amazing. The Sixers are probably going to end up making the playoffs now. The whole league. I know Adam Silver doesn't like Sam Hinkie. I know a lot of people, even around the city of Philadelphia, they're still scarred from the last 4 years of purposely losing basketball games. But you look at the way the NBA is making these trades and these deals. You're either young and not winning anything yet, and you're young and you're building on the rise to try to then sell everything for a star, or you're young, trying to develop like Golden State, years away, trying to have these guys just go on a perfect trajectory. If you're young, then you look for old guys that are good leaders, good locker room guys, Jamal Crawford's, J.J. Redick's, Jared Dudley, just guys that have been on podcasts that sound really smart and good people. I mean that jokingly, but I also mean sincerely that these guys are good dudes, the guys that have been on like the JJ Redick podcast. So then you get the old dudes like the Sixers are doing, and you build upwards. You look at Brooklyn, they're doing it. The Pacers are headed down towards Tankville. That's the problem with the Clippers. You don't want to be in purgatory. You don't want to be a franchise, and that's why Larry Bird got ousted. That's why Larry Bird's like, I can't beat LeBron James. I don't, even though our teams gets to the Eastern Conference Finals, no one really respects it. There's no real way to win a title. I'm just tired of doing this, We're now going to lose basketball games on purpose. That's just not the way I grew up. That's not the way that I worked from French Lick to Indiana State. And a lot of guys, a lot of people, and I have nothing against these opinions. I actually kind of understand the moral of sports is competing and not losing on purpose. And that's why people will never, look at Sam Hinkie and give him credit, because the guy purposely lost, and you could say sabotaged, entire seasons of basketball. Entire seasons of season ticket holders that pay to see these guys play basketball. Sam Hinkie basically said, I don't care about any of you coming to this arena. We're aiming for a championship in 8 years down the line. These tickets are meaningless. This product is going to be meaningless, and we need guys we need 18-year-old kids to fill into something great, to be the next big thing. Frankly, as much as it hurts to maybe say that to people, it's the right way to go. Because do you want to win a championship? That's the question. You can be Memphis. You can have tremendous fun. Be in a fan base that absolutely loves the heck out of your players. Run up against the juggernauts in the second round. Get beaten 6 games. Have great seasons, great characters. Bring a city together. Have a lot of fun. Maybe once in a blue moon you'll have a chance to go to the conference finals. And then you'll probably go to 5 or 6. You'll probably never get to like a 7-game series. To tell you the truth, I want teams like Memphis to win. The Memphis Grizzlies are kind of like in football what I correlate to the Baltimore Ravens. And in every other sport, when you have teams like the Royals, the Ravens, even even teams like the Kings that get great players and very good teams. And the Ravens are the perfect example because with John Harbaugh, You'll remember the year where in Baltimore they lost to the Patriots, and Lee Evans had a touchdown in the right corner of the end zone in Foxborough, 5 seconds left, and he dropped the ball. And then Billy Cundiff, to send the game into an extra overtime in the AFC title game, he missed a 26-yard field goal by shanking it left. The Ravens every year put themselves in the mix, and I don't mean the Cincinnati Bengals playoff mix. They would actually win games, and they were like the Memphis Grizzlies of basketball because they'd always be there in the conference, deep into the playoffs. The NFL is great though, because a lot of those times when you get into that scenario, when you get into the mix, you eventually are going to hit. Eventually Peyton Manning and his team got to the Super Bowl. Eventually Donovan McNabb and the Eagles were able to get to a Super Bowl, were able to get to a title. And that's why the NFL playoffs is pretty dang special. It's a one-game scenario, and usually if you're a good enough regular season team, you're going to have a good chance. When you look at the NBA, LeBron James has won 7 Eastern Conference titles and really hasn't been challenged in the past maybe 4 or 5 years. When you look at the West right now, Golden State is still probably going to win the championship. And that's what's causing the Sam Hinkies of the world to exist. Because in the NBA, the stars are too powerful that you essentially have no chance of winning a title. One way to fix the effectiveness of stars NBA, a lot of people think it's with the salary cap. It's even easier. It's in the on-court product. It's called less fouls. LeBron James, if he gets mugged, pushed around a lot, it's going to make for a product that might be a little sloppier, less high scoring. But with the freedom of movement, when you can't touch a LeBron James, when you can't touch Steph Curry, these guys are going to rain threes. These guys are going to mid-range you. These guys are going to do everything to you all day long. The key is actually letting the refs, is taking the whistle out of the referees and letting games get more physical. Then, bruisers like, Zach Randolph, even Tony Allen, we talk about those bruisers, Jimmy Butler, the Thibodeau teams. Then the Thibodeau teams can rise. You can rise, and the Wolves can be really competitive. And you're going to see then more parity because the stars are, you're going to then get just athletes, and you're going to have Marcus Smarts, and you're going to have guys like that just play super physical brand of ball, and it's going to be less pretty, but you're going to see more parity that way. If you allow, if you allow the NBA to be wide open, you're then going to get the most finesse and skill guys to win. And to let scrappier, less talented guys win, you just, allow the refs. You basically prevent more freedom of space, and that's kind of a way to kind of get these teams competing with Golden State again. You look at Kawhi Leonard and San Antonio. You need some effectiveness to guard against Kevin Durant, to be able to win. But that's the problem with the NBA, and that's why it's so funny, because you have such a wave now. You have the 8 teams that are all gunning, for the top of the chain. In 2008 and 17, we're going to have 5 teams, and Oklahoma City's included, that are called Win Now, that we're going for the jugular teams. Then you're going to have the 25, 23 teams. They're just saying we got to try to be as bad as possible. We want to get draft picks. We want to have clear, open, free agent, cash money. And it's gonna be pretty funny. And then you're going to see some franchises maybe settle into the 6th seed in the smaller markets where there's less pressure to actually win a title. And who knows, and they'll sneak into the playoffs. And maybe if their fan base is a little nicer and doesn't need a title as much as maybe a very high-maintenance city, then maybe you will be able to sneak in. Maybe you'll just be able to settle into a playoff, get a series or two, love the heck out of your players, and pay the Paul Millsaps and the solid B+ B players of the world and just kind of coast on. But unfortunately, you'll probably get tripped up in the end. It would be nice in a perfect world if the NBA would be kind of like the NFL or Major League Baseball, where you look at the Hawks and Paul Millsap and like a team with like, Jeff Teague and Corver and a team, Al Horford. If a team like that could make it to a championship. But in the NBA, it's all about the dominance. It's all about the stars. And that's why the NBA is an interesting beast. And that's why you're seeing free agency now be so trepidatious, so wild. Alrighty, guys. It's probably all I got for y'all tonight. What a night indeed. More shoes to drop tomorrow. And, I don't even know if that's a cliche or not. Trying to cliche, I don't even know if I could cliche. It's the other foot to drop, whatever. Anyways, guys, we will see you on the flip side, all right? Paul George is a funder. We'll see ya.